So good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Beatrice Gedenji, the Access to Finance Manager at the Alliance for Inclusive and Nutritious Food Processing Program. We are very delighted to host you for this webinar on access to finance. And I take this opportunity to invite the Program Chief of Party, Liz Eckert, to take us through the next session.
Thank you, Beatrice. Can you hear me okay? All right, good afternoon and good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, all right, I think slight glitch. Good afternoon and morning again. So I am the Chief of Party for the Alliance for Inclusive and Nutritious Food Processing. We are a partnership between USAID, Partners in Food Solutions, and TechnoServe, and we aim to create a more competitive food processing sector and in turn increase the availability of safe, affordable, and nutritious foods. Our program provides technical assistance to food processors in Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Zambia, and Malawi. And we address specific manufacturing and business challenges that hinder growth. And as our package of activities, we work with the Initiative for Smallholder Finance, ISF, a sub-partner that works with selected MSEs to access finance required for the business growth. Under the Access to Finance portfolio, the program offers support through business advisory and investment preparedness to support entrepreneurs and enterprises to prepare for investment, and linkages to capital providers who vary from private equity, conventional lenders, impact investors, and challenge funds. Today's panel focuses on women entrepreneurs and their abilities and constraints in accessing finance for their business growth. We are delighted to have Songbae Lee, USAID's Ag Finance Team Lead, as our facilitator for today's session. We also have a fantastic panel of leaders in the food processing and finance sectors in East and Southern Africa. I'd like to introduce Winnie Wandimi, CEO and founder of Wimssy Fresh Dairy, Kenya. Wamuyu Mahinda, Managing Partner for Collaborative Value Partners Africa. Monica Musonda, CEO and founder of Java Foods, Zambia. Munyutu Waigi, CEO Ongoza and co-founder Ummati Capital. And Elizabeth Bischof, co-director Bdelo Limited, Kenya. I will turn it over to Songbae now to jump into the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I am just trying to keep up with the chat. Thank you to everyone for introducing themselves. It's great to see everyone here. And I agree, this is a really interesting panel. I think, as I mentioned, as some of you might have seen on my LinkedIn post about it, I was hesitant to moderate this panel because it's not really a topic that I feel comfortable typically talking about. But I think this is a great opportunity for me to learn more and also share this experience with everyone who's joining us here today. So this panel also has an interesting length. It's an hour and 15 minutes. So what we're going to be doing is talking with the panelists, with me asking them questions and trying to have more of a discussion and a direct Q&A for about 45 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So if you have questions, please just put them in the chat, and then we have folks on our side who will help sort through those and share them with me to ask. So the panelists, I think we have most of the people here, but there's basically two groups. There's a group of what they call guests, which is Munyutu, and I think we are still waiting for one other. And then we have the women entrepreneurs themselves. So we're going to start with our guest panelists and then move over to the women entrepreneurs and then hopefully bring everyone together. So I just want to start off by also saying that what always happens on these panels, we'll have a prep call to get to meet each other. And I just have to admit, that's my favorite part. That's when we really get to just meet each other the first time. I really enjoy talking to them. It's a lot less pressure, and we had a great discussion. And then I just wish we had recorded that, and then we could just play it back here. So I hope we can kind of replicate that that energy we had in that initial discussion when we met each other. And also, I am going to really directly pull from some of those points that we raised to make sure that we hit those points on this call right now. The second thing that will come out, and I don't think came out in the introduction, is there's two, this is about food, agriculture, agri-SMEs, women entrepreneurs, but we're talking about a couple of products that are also close to my heart, and I'll definitely be highlighting those. One is instant noodles. I grew up on instant noodles. I love them. I love that to hear that one of our entrepreneurs is trying to make them more healthy. And the other one is tortilla chips. Also a big fan. So these are, I think, two snack foods that a lot of people will be able to relate to. Finally, I'll just say before jumping into my first question is, please excuse my background. We had some technical difficulties trying to get my Feed the Future background to work. But I also do like keeping it real, and so you can enjoy some of my kids' artwork in the background. So I'm going to start off with Wamuyu. Oh no, Wamuyu is the one that's not here. Sorry, that's just the order of my notes. So Munyutu. So Munyutu, I also have a little bio intro I wrote. He's a serial founder, co-founder. And when I looked up, did my research on him, looked at his LinkedIn page, I counted 1 company he founded and 3 companies he co-founded. And his company Ongozo helps entrepreneurs grow their businesses. Start off with a theme. Even though this is a specific topic we're talking about today, women entrepreneurs and access to finance, I'd like to back up more about entrepreneurship, because I just think that plays such a large role in this overall discussion we're having. And the theme about entrepreneurship is failure. And I think this is something that Munyutu raised. I heard him say that on the interview I listened to, something about normalizing failure. Also, I think on our prep call, he talked about getting failure out of the way. A really important point. I wish the development world would normalize failure more, that we would talk about it more. I wish we would talk more about failure at USAID. But what do you mean by getting failing out of the way, normalizing it? And specifically, I'm curious, how many businesses have you failed at?
Very good question. So one of the biggest challenges an entrepreneur goes through is the fear of failure. What happens if I don't give out the visual response that the majority expect from me? And the majority is a mixture of friends, family, your professionals who you may have left when you became an entrepreneur. So what I talk about when I say we need to normalize failure is it's part of the process. And if I look back at my journey, I've almost failed as equally as I've succeeded. So I cannot stand here and say that I've not incurred failure, which is extremely painful. Because what tends to happen as an entrepreneur is you get married to a certain future. And if that future is not achieved, it tends to come with a lot of heartache and pain. And we should normalize the fact that you may not achieve what it is you think you wanted to achieve, but it doesn't mean you've not achieved something in your journey. So I do encourage a lot of the entrepreneurs on this panel to welcome and embrace failure as part of the process and part of the journey.
Thank you for that, Munyutu. And actually, so I see that Wamuyu is on the line now. And so Wamuyu, as Liz mentioned, founder of Collaborative Value Partners, which takes a leadership role in initiating multi-stakeholder alliances. And I'm going to stick on this failure topic because I also listened to an interview. First of all of you have great, a lot of great videos of all of you on YouTube. So I encourage our participants to look those up if they'd like to learn more than we have time to go over. But there was a quote, I think in a previous job that you had, that you said, have you tried? 3? Now you want to try your 4th? So I wanted this idea of entrepreneur, or this idea, not everyone. And I want to look at even a more specific question. If a young woman came up to you for advice, let's say she's just graduating from university, and she asks, should I look for a job or should I start my own business?
Thank you very much. That's a good question because it always comes. I mean, a lot of young people want to go into business because they have been informed that going into business gives them more income than a salary, because sometimes you start a salary and your beginning figure is very low. So there's encouragement from those in business who say if you can succeed in your business, you'll be able to earn more. But it's of course never that straightforward. And we have experienced many failures, and people coming, especially at the youth banner where we were supporting young people to start their own enterprises. What would happen is that they would fail, and in some cases they would get very discouraged. But we always, in fact, encourage those who failed, because you said once you have failed, it means that you have learned some lessons, and therefore you're at the next level. You're now not in high school, you're in secondary school, and then you're in university in terms of business creation and understanding. And the beauty of that is that those who attempted it even second and third time did better. So it's okay to fail. I think that's what we're saying. It's okay to fail. And when you fail, you pick up you pick yourself up and move on and get to the next level of business.
Thank you, Wamuyu. So I'm going to move on. We'll definitely come back and talk to both of you. I'm going to switch over. Oh, first of all, I was told that I was breaking up a little bit. Wamuyu, can you hear me better now with my headset versus
yes,
my
I can
earphones?
hear you better. And I didn't introduce myself. I don't know whether you wanted me to introduce myself, because I just answered your question.
Yeah, I said a few words about you right before, but
okay.
please go ahead and add anything you'd like.
Okay, I probably didn't hear what you said about me because you were breaking. I just wanted to say that I'm currently the managing partner and convener of Collaborative Value Partners Africa. And one of my assignments is a private sector development and outreach consultant for Challenge Fund for Youth Employment. So I'll be very happy to share the lessons learned as we have given grants to people who are creating jobs for young people, for youth.
And I just also wanted to add, for both you, Wamuyu and Munyutu, if you want to, you can put your organization's web link into the chat if people want to save that for later to learn more afterwards. Of course, we want them to pay attention to us speaking now, but it would be good to have that for reference. So I'm going to switch over now to the entrepreneurs, and with the entrepreneurs, we'll talk a little bit more specifically about their financing journey. So I'm going to start with Winnie, which, if anyone folks might know on this call, would likely be her. She was the one that I was most familiar with. I read about her company, Wimssy, a dairy company in Kenya, in reports that people have given to me at USAID. I've also heard the company discussed when I've talked to investors, and I've also seen her on panels before. So it's great to be here together with you again. And share some of your journey with you. I think that the point I'd like you to talk about that came up, which I thought was really interesting in our earlier discussion, was your relationship with a local bank. And I say that way because I think local banks and their lending or non-lending in the agricultural sector raises a lot of strong feelings. And I think your experience sounds like it's been positive. So I'd be curious to hear how you developed that relationship and how has that relationship helped you grow your business?
Good afternoon, everyone. I will just introduce myself. I'm the managing director for Wimssy and also the founder, where we facilitate access to affordable nutrition, milk and milk products to the whole family with an objective of helping farmers add value to their milk. I will go straight to the question of the banks. As an entrepreneur, it's never an easy journey to get financing. And normally when you're starting a business as an entrepreneur, you might not have enough capital. So I will give a small story of my journey. When I started business, I did not have enough capital, but I had a story, I had an idea, and I knew what I wanted. So I had a plan of what I wanted to do. So I worked to many banks and would give my story, but I had no collateral. I had nothing to offer as a security. So it became very impossible for me to get funding from many banks. But I had only one bank that listened to me, and we were able to start a journey. With only a story, they were able to listen to me, and we started a journey. So far, we've worked together, and I've been able to get the company moving through debt financing, and by paying, you make you make the bank have confidence with you, and also seeing that exactly what you're saying is what you're also doing on the ground. And initially, it has been easy for us to grow, but grow slowly. You cannot move as you want, because when we started Wimssy, they come really quickly, what gap of nutritious, affordable products out there. And so many customers were able to connect with us, and we got the product moving faster. So when we went to buy machinery, we did not also have collateral, which is normal thing in businesses or when entrepreneurs are coming up. So those are quite some of the challenges that women in Africa or in Kenya face, because sometimes you want this machine to do this, you have a story, but you don't have that collateral that you can take to hold on to a machine. So those are some of the challenges that I would first highlight.
Thank you, Winnie. And we already have a question, and I'm wondering if you're comfortable sharing the name. Let me ask in a couple questions, but one is the name of the bank. And I think that I'd love to get a little more detail. So I would also think it'd be great if you could share the name of the bank. I'd also be curious, like you said, you met and with the story. How did you get that first meeting? Right? How, was it a USAID program, or was it a personal introduction? Was it a seminar? How did you meet? Which bank? How did you meet them? And what was the first product you started with? Was it a checking? Was it a savings account you opened? Working capital line? Was it a loan? Well, how did that relationship start? Because I think that's the hardest part.
Okay, so thank you. So the bank that I've been dealing with is Equity Bank. Equity Bank was able to listen to me with my small story of what I wanted to do to the farmers, what I wanted to do to the product, and what I wanted to offer. That is the affordable product, nutritious product out there. So they were able to listen to me, and we have journeyed together. How I met Equity Bank is that I worked to the bank. As I told you, I had worked to many banks, just gave my story, and not many were able to connect with my story because they could not imagine that with a story, they will give you money. But Equity was able to take up that, and we were able to work together. So far, we've been working with Equity Bank.
And just to follow up is, what was your first product with the bank, the first bank product? And what would you say to somebody who is in your position today? Should they go work for a bank first before they reach out to a bank?
So my first product was the working capital. That was what we needed most, because we needed to buy milk from farmers and then sell it. So we didn't have enough working capital. Then the second product was the asset financing, where we were able to get a truck for taking our products to the market. So with that, we've been able to get other products on the way. And I think it's a good partner because they are listening partners, for sure.
Great. And I just think that's a really important point. When you think about looking for financing to be effective, first of all, you need to have a story like Winnie was talking about. You need to understand how banks work. You can talk to people that work at banks if you haven't worked at a bank yourself, but you really, I think it's underlooked how important it is to understand who you're talking to. And you can do that through different ways, even if you haven't worked at a bank. And third, the product you're looking for. If you need to ask for something, you need to know what you're asking for. And what Winnie described as a natural progression. You're going to start out with shorter term working capital loans that will usually be revolving. And then later loans that are longer term for working to invest in fixed assets like trucks that help you grow your business. But that's a natural progression. We have maybe too little financing, but if there's any, it's usually for working capital. And then that next step is going to be these longer term fixed asset loans. I just want to stay on this idea of local banks, and do any of the other participants, panelists, like to add their own thoughts about local banks? Are you surprised by Winnie's story? Do you want to add your own story or your own opinion about the role local banks play in financing agricultural SMEs, and specifically for women?
So I could chime in on that one.
I was kind of looking at you, so.
So I'm based in Kenya and I'm based in Nairobi. And as Ongoza, we hosted a panel to work with women entrepreneurs in climate. And we got a snippet of the challenges women face, especially when looking to raise capital from the traditional banking structures. So it's important for us to remember that, especially in Kenya, the CBK governs all banks, and it ensures that all banks need collateral in order to disperse funds to anybody who's looking to borrow, which means despite your gender as an entrepreneur, you're faced with the issue of having some form of collateral. Now, where it becomes discriminatory is when you've got women professionals, especially engineers, who banking staff at the time were not able to understand and grasp the level of intellect that they are working with. So they would have very many condescending questions regarding the ladies' business, simply because this is an industry that has been dominated by men. So we are already fighting issues within our core lending ecosystem, which is the financial system such as banks. And I'm keen to find alternative ways for us to ensure that this level of prejudice is removed and is made much easier for our female entrepreneurs to acquire faster loans.
Thank you for that. And Winnie, since the questions are coming in specifically, and I like the detail, I'm not sure if you can answer this follow-up question. I'm not sure if you were the one that managed the asset financing from Equity Bank, or if you had a separate, if that's done by like a finance manager. Are you comfortable talking more specifically about the asset finance loan you got for the truck?
Yes, I'm okay. Comfortable talking about it.
And then, so the specific question, some of them are, well, there's a general question about the finance, when you get financing, the profit margins. And I asked that in the context that a lot of the lending I see in agricultural finance is for export crops like coffee or cocoa, which I think have a higher margin that can actually make enough profit to repay the loan. I think in maybe in local crops like dairy, or products might have lower profit margins. So the question is, were the profit margins enough to be able to get the bank comfortable that you'd be able to repay the loan? And then the second question is specifically about the asset finance loan. Any more detail you can provide about that? Did you have to just provide the truck as collateral that you purchased? Did you have to provide additional collateral? How long that loan was for, or how much was it for, the interest rate, anything that you'd be comfortable to share?
Thank you. For that initial track, I did not have to give collateral because we didn't even have it. So we didn't have anything to give, but we agreed on a friendly way of paying. So we were given some years where we were able to pay slowly, depending on what we were making. So we didn't have to pay the full amount, or we didn't have to pay within a year. In fact, the first track we paid within 5 years. So we were able to stretch it in a way that we were able to manage whatever we were making is what we are able to pay with. So a bank can be friendlier and can be able to break that down.
This does not sound like any bank I know of. So this is amazing. So I think, did they either really like you, or was this a special program, like not a standard product? Because you're talking about like a very long-term loan. I mean, over 1 year's long. You're talking about variable repayments, not a fixed rate. Was this a special program, or is this something that anyone can apply for?
It's anyone can apply for. Even today, if you want to, they will give you. You have to show what are you making, provided you are able to pay whatever you say. Okay. They will listen to you. And that's why I said initially, they are good partners. And that's why many people were not able to help us then, except that one bank that was able to listen to us.
Thank you, Winnie. And I apologize to other panelists for getting stuck on this, but I really like that detail. I'm getting, prodded by the organizers saying we need to move on. So I'm gonna switch to Monica now, who is the founder of Java Foods. And I think I mentioned already. Well, they produce fortified instant noodles in Zambia, and I mentioned I love instant noodles. Who doesn't? And in this case, if there's anything else you'd like to add about your food journey as a as an entrepreneur, but specifically, I'd like you to talk about your personal finance journey. You mentioned you have a very well-known impact equity investor as a shareholder. And I'd be curious, for this case, how did you make that decision between equity and debt, which is, I think, another big decision? My feeling of what I've heard is most people, I hear both. There's not enough equity, but I hear people don't want equity, right? They want debt. How, for you, was it whatever you could get, or you knew you wanted equity?
Great. First of all, thank you very much for having me and allowing me to share my experiences. Where Java Foods is based out of Lusaka, Zambia, we use 100% locally sourced raw materials to make nutritious foods. Our leading brand is Easy Noodles, which is our leading brand here in Zambia, as well as Zimbabwe, and growing in Malawi as well. On the issue of financing, I started the business almost 10 years ago. And what's interesting is my background was not food. I was actually a lawyer for many years. And I think my struggle was to convince people that my business, I was doing this as a business, and I was going to carry out what I was saying I was going to carry out. So despite the fact that I could have been a very highly qualified lawyer with many years of experience, I think banks discounted what I was going to do and actually were less willing to offer different products. And so when we first went to a bank, I mean, 2 years into the business, I think we were given the bare minimum with the bare risk that they're willing to take. So a very simple product. And we witnessed this throughout sort of the early years, where bankers have to be seen to sort of support women SMEs, but really not trying to be innovative about your business, trying to understand the business and offer you product solutions. We found very much that was one, how they discriminated, because they just were not willing to be open-minded about products. So if I had been a man, perhaps I would have been offered a working capital facility, import facility, and an overdraft, perhaps. But in the initial stages, we were only offered actually an overdraft. And overdrafts are quite expensive over a period of 12 months, and you have to go back into a positive position after 60 or 90 days. So really quite, whilst helpful, it was quite also onerous on a very young business. So we pushed the business for the first 5 years, and then decided we were at the point where we needed a very big capital injection for expansion. So we realized if we wanted to grow the way we wanted to grow, the small bank financing we were being given would not sustain the growth. And at that time, I was unable to continue to finance the business on my own. And the only practical way was to actually raise money from a third party and to actually raise equity. It was a difficult position for us, because obviously being a small business, we had to then first look at being investor ready. Having your books in order, really understanding your business plan, how do you make money, how do you get paid, and being able to articulate this correctly to an investor who would invest in you. And that took some time. It took time to get our financials in order over the years, to get them audited. Took time to get key people in the business, because also investors were very keen on understanding that the business wasn't just about Monica, and I had a good team that was going to deploy the capital. And when we got to that stage, then we began to speak to investors. And obviously the difficulty, particularly for Africa and more so for women-run businesses, is that there are not many investors coming in at the smaller scale and investing directly in women-run businesses. I mean, I think that's one thing we got to get out of this webinar, that we're really looking for more, impact investors, venture capitalists, or private equity who have a particular focus on women-run and owned businesses. Because at the time when I went out there were very, very few. My impact investor was very interested in our story because of what we focused on, the fact that we were looking at a real growing young population who have very different consumption patterns, the fact that we were getting raw materials locally, the fact that we were adding value in Zambia, the fact that obviously it was a woman-run business was all very attractive to them, but we really needed to work on the numbers as well. And that took some time. And I was very grateful that I was able to get a financial advisor to support us. And we were able to conclude a deal in 2018, which was a mix of equity and debt. And I must say, although it took a lot of growing up, I think it was probably one of the best things we did. I have a very active board, a board that believes in us as Java as a business, and supports us in our thinking about how we need to scale. I mean, the idea very much is that about scaling the business, about what else we can do. We are obviously very well known as an instant noodle manufacturer in Southern Africa, but now we're hoping to be known for other products as well. And this is fundamentally supported by having great shareholders who believe not only in me as a founder, but in the business.
Thank you for that, Monica. So much to unpack there. I am going to stick with it a little bit just because I don't want to lose the flow. But one thing that's come up, and I kind of specifically was asking Winnie about it, you said that first meeting with the bank. How did you get that first meeting? Was it an email, a phone call, introduction? Do you walk in, make an appointment? Like, how do you get that first contact?
I think getting an appointment is probably not difficult. I think banks will see all. No, I think banks will see all customers. Yes, I think the issue is whether they'll approve your lending to you and how they will approve it. I think what we have seen, and unless things have changed, is the process in which to get any form of facility through a bank is quite onerous. It's a lot of paperwork. It requires you to be fairly sophisticated and have everything in order. So Winnie talked about collateral, and I actually had, in order for my first facility, had to use a personal asset in order for us to get our first facility. And thereafter, the facility, despite increase in revenue, was never increased for 3 years because they were doing the bare minimum, taking the bare risk on a business that was run by a woman. As I said, I think they would have perhaps been a little bit more creative if I had taken a man there, or or otherwise. And I think it's really about women have to really prove much more to banks in order for them to access more financing. So I think appointments are easy or easier. I think it's actually getting the access, the actual financing. How long does it take to get the process approved? What paperwork is required? What else is required in order for you to get financing? How much can you get? What is your interest rate? Interest rates are also a reflection of risk. So maybe interest rates are definitely high on the continents. You can imagine maybe as a woman, I'm priced much higher because of a risk. And so my interest rate is much higher. And I think those are the key issues we should be addressing.
I want to follow up on another point you made, because it's interesting. There's this kind of paradox, or I don't know, contradiction. I don't know the right way to describe it. You said, it's difficult, you would have gotten likely easier. It would have been easier for you to get a loan, or you would have gotten better terms if you were a man. I think if we had this panel for just men and just said access to finance, they would have the same complaints that there's not enough financing, right? So but the point I'm making is it's hard to get loans, period. And that's even harder for women. But I'm just wondering, it almost makes it, you make it kind of sound like it's easy for men entrepreneurs to get loans. Is that is that the case?
Maybe I speak from experience. I think definitely if you're a man in a particular sector, if you come from that sector, if I was a man and I worked for Unilever, I think I would have gotten a loan earlier, right?
Got it.
So right. I think definitely you can imagine for women in tech, right? Women in manufacturing, where there are very few women and people doubt your experience. I started my story by saying that I was a lawyer for many years and decided to wake up one morning to make noodles. And everyone was like, this ain't going to work, right? What does she know about it? So already you're off the back foot. So I think that is what we see a lot more of. And I think I've spoken on many panels across the world, and you see the same thing. Certain sectors, women are discounted 100% because they believe they just will not go through with it, or they don't have the capacity to deliver. And definitely, as I say, in tech, in manufacturing, in sort of male-dominated industries, you get this much more.
And what is the solution to that? Is it training for the bank employees?
I think it's multifaceted. I think we've heard a lot about training, but I think it's also one, cost of funds for the banks, to look about how we are funding the banks. I think I talked about really trying to grow other funding mechanisms and support. For instance, VC, which is focused on female-owned businesses in certain sectors, looking at more support around grants and maybe concessional financing or guarantees for women-run businesses. But I think we also have to understand the banking system has a particular way of operating. And perhaps as a startup or a first stop, the banks may not necessarily be the first place to start. And we need to fill the gap with other financing institutions before businesses end up banks. And that's, I think, probably better. You start off with venture capital, you start off with smaller funds that can support you to then get into a bank and then be treated as a business by a bank.
Thank you. And I don't know, someone told me my links aren't working. I put a link in for AHL, which is the fund manager that is the investor in Java, because they're on their website, it's public. I also added Aceli Africa. This is a program that USAID funds. I always just put a plug in. It's a great project that I work on that provides incentives to banks to make loans to women. So that's something you can learn more about on their website. They do not make loans directly. They work with the banks. I know I'm going too long, but I'm going to 2 more specific follow-up questions, and maybe we can keep it short. One is, you mentioned a financial advisor. Was that useful, right? To actually hire someone else to help you in this process? And the second, just so we can throw in some little chances to learn, can you say specifically what an overdraft facility is for people who aren't familiar with that product, and why they should be concerned about using it, maybe?
Sure. So I think the first one, a financial advisor, was very important for us. They color the business the right way. They support your numbers. They tell you what you need to say and provide to an investor who wants to invest in your business. I was fortunate that my financial advisor was provided to me through a grant, and that supported my capital raise. So really important, because investors want particular information on the business in a particular way in order for them to make their investment decision. And sometimes us as founders or first-time entrepreneurs don't really understand what it is, and then financial advisor helps. An overdraft basically is one of the many products provided by a bank, which allows you to use their money for a particular period of time. So you may have $10 and you use that $10 for transportation, but you need to pay a supplier another 20, and the bank basically provides this to you for a period of 60 to 90 days, but asks you to pay it back. And so it's short-term lending. Sometimes it can be secured or unsecured on an asset, but it tends to be very expensive because it's short-term.
Got it. So my understanding is, I'm not as familiar with it, but it's like a credit card, but you have to have your own money in the account. And then if you use, you can use more than you have. Whereas a credit card, you don't have to have any money. You can just use their money. Okay.
Exactly. And you have to pay it back or else it's basically terminated. So it is revolving. But unfortunately, it would never be as large as a working capital facility. Right. And sometimes very short term. So maybe 12 months.
Yeah. So short term, small amount, expensive. Yeah. But if you're going to start somewhere. The thing, I'm just going to comment on the, who gave you the grant for the advisor? Do you remember?
It was under the UK government, so under a program called Prospero, which is run by DFID at the time, which is now called FCDO, I think. Yeah,
that's correct. Okay, great. Glad to hear that there was a donor-funded program that actually provided technical assistance that was helpful. I am going to know, thank you for waiting, Elizabeth. And we'll definitely spend some time with you as well before we open it up to the panel. So Elizabeth is the founder of, I'll just describe it in shorthand, a tortilla chip company, Bdelo, that produces their chips and sources in Kenya. And I just want to share, to prepare for this webinar, I watched a video on how to make ugali. So it sounds like I heard that this tortilla chip idea came from the crust that can sometimes form when you make ugali. It reminds me of I'm Korean, a Korean dish you make with rice, and it's called bibimbap. And there also you form a crust on the bottom. And I'm guessing someone probably makes chips based on that concept as well. The point, besides sharing whatever else you'd like to add about your journey, the point I'd like you to kind of discuss more specifically or address is, you pointed out that funding was not your main issue. So I'd like to, if you could expand on that point, what you meant by that. Oh, is Elizabeth on? Oh, it looks like she might have dropped off. Okay. let me just go back to one open question, and to see if she can come back on. I'd like to talk a little bit, two topics. One, and then we'll open it up, and this is so anyone can answer. One is technical assistance. We're talking about access to finance. How helpful is technical assistance for helping businesses get access to finance? We heard the example from Monica that she was able to use a business advisor, but also we heard that it takes years to prepare, and really is a couple months of technical assistance going to make a difference. Get a company which is not investment ready, make them investment ready. Well, another way of asking this question is, instead of having another webinar on access to finance, we should be doing fill in the blank. And would anyone like to answer that?
Yes, I want to comment on, thank you, on investor readiness. One of the challenges that a lot of, Monica is lucky. Monica is like at the top of that range in terms of women with the right knowledge on how to access finance. When women are starting, when they haven't been in business for long, they want a different environment. And in fact, in our research, we realized that women are often networking less, generally, their nature. And therefore, it's difficult for them to operate at a level where networking is the answer to the questions that they have or the challenges that they have. And this is easier for men because they network easily, and in that process, they learn a lot. Therefore, we realize that entrepreneurs sometimes require a tailored approach, where you're saying specifically, we want to reach women, not because they are lesser people or that they are less educated or less anything. It's just that they're different in nature. The way they socialize, the way they approach each other, the way they understand things is a bit different. So it's important, therefore, to tailor this to them. So women generally like to receive more personalized services. In fact, I find that because I'm a pipeline manager, I spend more time with women because they want to chat. And even as we are chatting, sometimes they'll ask me, how is your family? I mean, we go off a little of the business, but that's who we are. We are social animals. We want to discuss other things even as we are discussing business. So as we therefore encourage women, we need to realize that that's what they like, and therefore tailor things to take this into account. So the other thing is that women take longer to make decisions. So a man can quickly just make a decision. Pap, I'm borrowing this money, or I need this amount of money. A woman takes a little more time. They consult a little more, and therefore, and I think by nature we are probably more risk averse, and that's just who women are. And that doesn't mean that we don't know what we want. It's just that we need a little more time. I think these are the things that, therefore, when designing, and I don't like this idea of women, technical support for women. I mean, it is technical support for whoever needs funding. It's just that the approach may be different. And I was looking at a case study that is in the internet today by TLCom Capital, that was talking about two ladies who are in the venture capital space. And they were saying that one of the things they've realized as women in that space and supporting women who are entrepreneurs is that there has to be a deliberate attempt to bring women on board, deliberate attempt. And they're saying it has to be intentional, committed effort. And they're saying not quotas, not where we say 20% of the people we fund are women. Forget about quotas, because that's not the point. The point is that can we reach women in the way that's best for them to understand what it is that we are offering. Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree. There?
Sure. I just want to say let me just let you go next. I just wanted to follow up really quickly on something Wamuyu said, because this is something that I've been wondering about. I agree with things you said, and I'm just wondering if I had said them, it would have come off terribly, right, as a man. And if I had said women take longer to decide things, I think when you said it, people coming from your perspective, they'll be open to hearing that. I think as a man, if I said that, it would not. Do you agree with that, Wamuyu? I
think it's how you said, because I said they take more time. They take more time to make decisions.
Yeah.
Taking more time is positive. There's nothing wrong with taking more time to make a decision.
Okay. I guess what I was getting at is I was trying to extend what you're saying, that we need to have programs that help anyone, but to reach a certain segment, if they're underrepresented, it needs to be intentional. But I also wonder if the people doing that outreach probably better if they're women because they understand that group that you're targeting. So that I just think that that might be important as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't see who wanted to speak next. Who was that?
Oh, it's me. I just wanted to talk about the technical assistance.
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, and you were
Oh,
asking
Winnie.
how-
Okay, when you say it's like when someone calls you, it's me. I couldn't see who it was. Okay,
Right.
Winnie, go ahead.
All right. Okay, no problem. Thanks. Now I was saying about the technical assistance. I just want to say it's very, very important in a business. Have worked with TechnoServe. I think it's our second, third year working together. So we've journeyed together. And in this journey of TechnoServe, we have learned a lot, and they have really been of help. Like initially, when they came in, we didn't have a board in place, but we have been able to put a very good board. And with that governance, the company has really changed in the way we look at things. So I think technical assistance in a business is very welcome, and it's very good for upcoming businesses also. And then also like in the ERP system, they have come in, we have identified gaps in it, even in the production. So I think technical assistance would be very, very helpful to upcoming businesses.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie, and thank you for raising. TechnoServe is the prime for AINFP. I think this gets really confusing for somebody outside of USAID. USAID funded program. It's marketed as AINFP, and we hire TechnoServe to implement it. And then TechnoServe goes out and finds and works with businesses like Wimssy and Winnie. And there's actually another more specific question about your truck loan. A lot of interest in that truck loan. When you said that it was variable repayment, was it based on? Let's see. Was it based on the sales? So was it they just actually calculate your sales, and based on how much your sales were, determine how much you had to repay for the loan?
No. It is you agree in the initial agreement of the loan. So you are able to project whatever you want to sell. So with your projections, you're able to set an amount.
Ah, got it. Okay, so it was customized. It's almost like customized, but once you choose it, then it's fixed.
It is fixed, yes.
Okay, but got it.
Yes, it's fixed all the way. Thank you.
And Elizabeth, thank you. I'm glad you're back with us. Are you able to hear now and join us?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I hope I don't get dropped off again. Yeah, so maybe I should speak quickly and before that time comes.
Go ahead. And so I don't know if you heard any of my introduction, but I just described a little bit about your company and tortilla chips and ugali. And I wanted you to specifically talk about how finance was not your main issue.
Okay, thank you, Songbae and everybody for inviting me to speak in this forum. Finance for me was only became an issue because when we initially started, we started very well. We were doing extremely good with our business until a time when two major supermarkets in Kenya kind of really went bankrupt, and they went down with lots of our money and lots of our stock. We had really built a good, credit record, and we were doing relatively well until that time. Now, obviously, when we fell apart, and I think when you guys were talking about, failing, sometimes it's horrible failing when you don't have any other option, or when you don't have something to fall back to. So for small businesses, it's very tough when mistakes or things happen that may not be within your control. And it happened to us. So we kind of had to have a new start. And it was very challenging to get money because obviously we are in a niche product. I mean, we deal with niche product. We're high value. Our target customers are they.
Oh no, Elizabeth, you cut out for me. Oh, you're back. Okay.
I'm back quickly. I'll just summarize to say that obviously money became an issue when we had to restart our business. So we had to mitigate that. I went back to work. My husband continued to build up the business. So I was lucky to find a job in the most unlikely places on earth, right in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia, that gave.
Oh, Elizabeth.
I'm very sorry. So my partner and I, we had to kind of separate, and I had to go back to work and he had to continue building the business. So this is how we have financed our business all these years. Until a year ago, because we wanted to scale up, we wanted to go into export. It became difficult because obviously it was not easy proving to banks that it was going to succeed, because we didn't have really good history and we had never worked with the banks. So fortunately enough, we came into contact.
I'm sorry, Elizabeth. Maybe anything. She might actually dropped off now. Sorry about that technical difficulty. I think we caught most of it. If she comes back, maybe she can add her finish her answer in the chat.
Yes. So I will just finish it quickly now. So we got Adapt Earth, that really became a profound partner to us, that is now working and really supporting us throughout our value chain, basically from the farm to the fork. And this is the kind of partnership I believe women or young businesses need. They need hand-holding, because there's so many complexities, so many challenges in business in our kind of environment, be it policy, be it infrastructure, be it market and distribution, especially in the kind of business we are in. The value chain is very complex. So really money is not enough. And we're very grateful that we got Adapt Earth that really took us along, and they are working with us. They are with our supply chain, they are in our operations, and also supported us now to come to the Middle East to build our.
Elizabeth, I'm just going to have to ask you to put your final thoughts into the chat. Thank you for that. I think the point she's making is that you have to, it's challenging, it's hard, it takes a long time, you need to be flexible. She did mention Adapta, which is her lender, and I put a link in the chat. I think another great thing about these webinars is actually just hearing examples of resources out there that have been successful for them. And Adapta is a very interesting new fund set up with money from Gates Foundation and has provided a loan to Bdelo, and they have a very strong technical assistant component and also a focus on climate finance for folks who want to learn more about that. There is I'm getting some questions now from people from the chat, and one question is, with liquidity getting constrained, is it even more difficult to find financing today? And I think, though, another way of saying that question, first we had COVID. First of all, it was a challenging environment for entrepreneurs, more challenging for women. Then we had a crisis, we had COVID. Then we have another crisis, the war in Ukraine. What is the experience in what you're seeing in the market today because of the environment we're in? Is anyone like to touch on that?
Hi, Ken, this is Monica.
I think it's Elizabeth here. I think it has made the environment even more unpredictable, because obviously these things happen and they happen so quickly. And businesses that rely on other services such as transportation or imported products.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Monica?
Sure, thank you. Definitely, I think what we saw coming out of COVID is immediately slowing down of funding. particularly grant funding, a lot of money, a lot of investors shoring up capital, not really sure how long the COVID crisis was going to go on for, programs being slowed down and stopped. I think that was the first shock out of COVID. And there were a lot of discussions and webinars about what is going to happen. TechnoServe, PFS did a lot of discussions with a lot of the entrepreneurs they were working with, that what happens now to finance businesses who are directly affected by the impacts of COVID. So it was really quite a shock to the system. And I think after that, things began to get back to normal a little bit. But of course, this year we've had different crises. And I think what the crisis is for this year is going to be the cost of funds. We're seeing the rest of the world through a recession happening, which means that money which was coming from the West is now going to cost a little bit more and will now go to places where they're short of investments and may even stay at home. And so for us, that is very worrying. The players the funds we were talking about before, will we see that their funding will now be restricted, reduced. We're still yet to see what's going to happen, but there are really real fears and concerns about the cost of financing and if it's still going to come. However, that does mean for us here in Africa that we need to think differently. There is no reason why we can't get the likes of pension funds. There are a lot of very successful African-run pension funds thinking differently about how to finance local businesses and really advocate for them to fill the gaps from international financing, which may slow down during this difficult time.
Thanks, Monica. And this is another question that came in similarly, kind of international finance. And I think this, if you would like to add or anyone else like to join, going back to this idea of where's the bigger opportunity, or what roles do the different sources of financing play? The local banks, we've heard some stories that local banks are a place to start, or international alternative lenders. And where do you think women entrepreneurs should go to, should spend their focus? Does it depend if they're early, later? Should they be trying to get the banks? Should they be trying to find these alternative international lenders? I guess is one way to just start the question.
I think, and from my perspective, I think it depends on where you are in your stage of business. I think if you're early stage, you're probably better on looking locally, and I meant local VC, also family and friends, to just really get the business up and running and to prove concept. I think that's going to be really, really important. And if you can find the likes of an equity bank that are willing to bank on SMEs, we have seen some banks come up with SME programs where they're able to lend unsecured between $5,000 to $10,000. And if that helps you get your business up and running and the business concept proved, then please take that money. So I think in an initial stage, I would look local. And then as your business gets traction, security of income and revenue, of customer base, your product ranges are increasing, you're understanding the business much more, then it'll be probably interesting to look beyond the borders, but knowing full well the complexity that comes with getting money from outside of the country.
Would anyone else like to add to that?
Yes, I totally agree with Monica on that. For early stage, it's important that that women identify local solutions who could be banks or some equity, and as they prove they prove their concept, they're able to grow the business, and other people are able to, should they say, take the risk on their business and therefore give them more money as they grow. And of course, one of the biggest challenges for women is collateral. So if a bank requires collateral and it's not available, then obviously that fund won't be available. And therefore, if we can start where we are getting little funding from an SME bank that doesn't need collateral, just looking at your banking patterns and so on, that's a good place to start.
And this topic, there's different ways to look at it. I think one is kind of, are these international lenders just providing short-term filling the gap until the banks come along? But I think I've heard some people think the banks are not going to get there. Don't bother with them, right? They're just too stuck in their ways. Should we, how much effort should like USAID or AINFP focus on trying to engage with the banks, local banks increasing their lending versus trying to encourage more alternative international lenders to focus on gender lens investing in the agricultural sector?
Yeah, I think the local banks are extremely expensive, because if you think, for instance, anything not less than 10%, it goes into the cost of your product. And for us, for instance, we just couldn't afford. It made our products too expensive. So personally, I think if there could be softer ways to support women, especially in the early stage, because most of the time, generally women may not have such a big, reserve of funds. And sometimes they have to do business besides working really to succeed, because the risk is too high. So personally, I think if there could be external funding to support women in the early stage to at least mitigate some of the risks that they might have, it will be very, very helpful, especially now when things are very unpredictable. The banks need almost 1,000% surety that you won't fail. But again, in our kind of environments, it's tough to have a business idea, especially in the agribusiness, that may be subjected to a lot of issues.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And Munyutu, before I pass it to you, I think you wanted to say something. I just want to highlight one thing that Elizabeth said. I think she kind of combined non-bank or international lenders with soft funding. So I think the thing to remember is, regardless if it's a bank, a local bank, or an international lender, if they are both commercial, they're going to be probably offering the same terms. I think what Elizabeth is saying, and just to be clear, it's a separate thing, getting more concessional, donor-funded, patient capital that's subsidized is more likely to come from an international source. Is that what you're saying, Elizabeth?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Because I think one thing that people seem to think, if it's coming from an international lender, it'll be cheaper. No, if it's coming from a subsidized lender who's international, it could be cheaper. But they do not have, if it's a regular investor that just happens to be international, then they're going to have the same cost constraints as a local lender. Munyutu, did you want to add something?
Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, when we started Umati Capital with my co-founder, Ivan Boa, one of the biggest challenges we had was getting access to the onward lending capital. So we scoured the local banks, and unfortunately, there was no positive response. We ended up getting $400,000 from an international lender. And you're right, it wasn't cheaper than the local banks, but it was a lot more accessible than the local bank funding was. So this is an active problem for both genders. It's both male and female entrepreneurs. So it's not just one-sided. And a challenge to USAID would be with a problem that keeps coming up and cropping up, which is access to financing for SMEs. Perhaps one way to look at it is to reimagine the entire model from the ground up and work with entrepreneurs in country, because each country has its own nuances, its own challenges, and started as a pilot where we say, what if we began re-looking at how we provided access to financing to a subset of entrepreneurs within a particular country and build from there? Because it seems as though going to traditional financing solutions or systems is similar to beating a dead horse.
Thank you. And I am going to make just a couple last comments, and then I'm going to give everyone a chance to say a final word if they'd like to, anything they did not get a chance to say, and before wrapping it up and try to not go over our allocated time. So a couple comments. Sorry, I have not been able to keep up with the chat, but just looking now, I see Herman just made a comment, and he is from Adapta. So if anyone wants to chat, learn more about Adapta, they can chat him. I also saw something from Aman, who is at IIX. So Aman, thanks for joining. And I saw you put a link in there. I'm familiar with IIX. Say hi to Rob Craybill if you work with him. He and I worked together in New York City years ago. And the comment I was going to make is about local currency lending, which was, I think, touched on and is reason often for the high interest rates. So I hear international lenders who get to often USD dollar funding will ask USAID for subsidy for the hedging cost. And I heard an interesting response to saying that the banks should be doing that local currency lending because they have the local currency deposits. But as Herman mentions, they can make as much money investing in government bonds, and they'd rather just not take that extra risk of lending to agricultural SMEs. But then again, that is again what Aceli Africa is trying to unlock is these local deposits stuck in banks and get them to increase the lending to agricultural SMEs. This is more for donors to hear about because Aceli Africa is a donor-funded program, but hopefully it's something that more of you will learn more. The banks, any banks on this call who want to be a partner with Aceli Africa, they can learn more about. And then I think the point Monica made before, I know USAID is also working a lot on trying to unlock those other domestic sources like pension funds. They clearly are risk averse and will need some sort of structure that they can get where the overall investments, the underlying investments are de-risked. So with that, we'll go backwards from the way I asked my questions, and I'll start with you, Elizabeth, if you'd like to make a final point or a last word. Okay, Elizabeth, maybe her connection is not working right now. Let's go to Monica.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Always a really good discussion and also real appreciation about women being at various points through their entrepreneurship journey. But I think what we need to do is understand the problems throughout the journey and see how we can best support women entrepreneurs grow their business to scale. So always helpful to talk, to understand. And whilst banks are slow to get to the party, they remain an important part of financing, particularly local economies and local businesses, and see how we can better work with them. Yeah, thank you. But thank you for having me.
Thank you, Monica. Winnie?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been great. I'm hoping that at least we have helped quite a number of entrepreneurs who are coming up, and I want to encourage them. It's a journey, so they should not fear. And then I also want to maybe just put across that, as Monica has said, yes, it's good to come up with programs that will help women come up with their ideas, and let's see what women can do.
Thank you, Winnie.
Munyutu?
Again, similar to Monica, I just want to thank you for inviting me to this conversation. And I challenge USAID to be the first pioneer to create a structure or model that's designed to actually addressing the issue at hand and engaging the entrepreneurs to do so while achieving the objective. And I'd love to get more and more involved in finding ways to reduce the barriers of access to finance for my peers, female entrepreneur.
Thank you, Munyutu. And Wamuyu.
Thank you very much. It was also a pleasure being on this forum this afternoon. I wanted to also mention that as we are growing our enterprises, I am encouraging those creating jobs for young people to get in touch with us, because we believe that as you grow bigger as an enterprise, you can employ more people and continue to employ more and more people. And that's the other part of what we do. We must encourage you to grow bigger and employ more people. And the Challenge Fund for Youth Employment has a grant that you can apply to grow your business or scale your business to employ more or create more jobs for young people. And if you are one such and you're in Kenya, please get in touch with me. I'll be very happy to have a discussion with you and to see how we can support you in employing more young people. And thank you very, very much for listening to us. I believe that the discussion has been very fruitful, and we'll continue to learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Wamuyu. Elizabeth, I don't know if your connection is good enough for you to, okay, go ahead.
I will run quickly before it disconnects. So thank you again, you guys. I'm sorry that my network wasn't as stable, but the few people that I've listened to, I think it was a great forum, and I hope we can have more and more of this kind. Networking and sharing stories is always very, very helpful. Personally, I've learned a lot So, and hopefully from this forum, I would reach out to some of you who I believe could be of assistance and support going forward. So good luck. And one thing I would only say that is that, you know, for women businesses, it has really specific challenge. And obviously we don't have the history or the, I would say, of especially in Kenya, I think now women are being supported and they're becoming on the forefront. Traditionally, we've had other roles. So I think women need to have a different approach that, unlike, you know, I mean, we have, because we don't have the history, we don't have the experience, we don't have the network. Now,
I think we got all the main points from Elizabeth. Thank you. And I know we didn't get to all the questions. Thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to recommend, I know often after these webinars, the questions we don't get to, maybe when they post the recording, they can add a blog with answers to those questions we didn't get to. But now at the close of this, I'd like to turn it back over to Liz from TechnoServe AINFP. Thank you.
Great. Well, first, let me thank all of the panelists. Your insights and honesty were fantastic. We've learned so much from you. And Songbae, you were hesitant to be our moderator, but you've done a fantastic job of really pulling out a lot of really fascinating information from our panelists, keeping the conversation flowing. There were a lot of questions at the end about whether or not we'll be sharing the video. We will be. We'll also be developing a blog that synthesizes some of the lessons that we learned today and many of the resources that were shared by the various chat participants. So thank you, everyone, all the attendees, everyone who's asked questions. And again, thank you so much to all our panelists and to you, Songbae. And everyone have a great afternoon or morning.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.